writing software and launched my screenwriting career. I knew nothing about setup. I knew nothing about payoffs, nothing about how to make my second act sing. All I knew was that I had a good idea and a good story. So since I loved the movie Tootsie, I decided that I was going to write a movie about a man who couldn't make it in the NBA, so he dressed up like a woman, tried out, and made it in the WNBA. It was the perfect first screenplay for me, given my basketball background. You see, I played on the WNBA's first championship team with the Houston Comets. At the time, my TV agent was with ICM, one of the largest and most respected agencies in Hollywood. I asked if she could pass my script along to the literary department there. She agreed. She passed it on to a lit agent who, not knowing whether I could write or not, agreed to read it. A few weeks passed, and finally my agent's assistant called and said, "We got the coverage back on your script. Please call us as soon as possible." Well, you can imagine I was excited. I called my TV agent, who said, "Wow, you got great coverage on your script. It was your first one, and the lit agent wants to talk to you." So the assistant passed me on to the literary agent, who said that he was going to do some sniffing around, check around in the system, and find out if there was anything like it in the works. So I waited a weekend, and on the following Monday, the agent called and told me that there was a script being shopped, very similar to mine. I was crushed. There I was, my first script out of the gate, good coverage and all, yet my script was probably going nowhere. That was my introduction into the business. So I quickly learned that it doesn't matter who thinks of an idea first. It's all about who can execute it first. It's all about who can get it into the hands of potential buyers first. All right, so if you're sitting there wondering if you can do this, you can. But it ain't going to be easy. In fact, you'll probably spend the first year wondering why you're doing it anyway. But if you stick with it and learn where to find help, you'll eventually be amazed at how much fun it can be to be a screenwriter. Now, with all of the screenwriting books on the market, you might think I am crazy for writing another one. And you're right, I am crazy, but not for writing another screenwriting book. See, I've searched high and low, and I've yet to find a book that's targeted to the first-time screenwriter. One of my strengths has always been in finding untapped markets and exploiting them for my own gain. I'm just kidding. Actually, I'm not. That's the beauty of capitalism. In fact, that's the essence of capitalism. But another reason I wrote this book is because I like to see writers get off on the right foot. When I wrote that script in 1999, that basketball script, I really, as I said, had no idea what I was doing. None. Well, let me take that back. I had some idea of what I was doing because nobody gets good coverage on a script if they don't have a clue about how to write a movie. But I didn't know what made my script good, and more importantly, exactly what I needed to do to make it great. I had no idea what I needed to do to make it a sellable script. That's a more accurate depiction of my screenwriting tenure at that time. I thought taking a few classes, reading a few books, and watching lots of movies was all I needed to know to become a good screenwriter, but I was wrong. Those things were useful, don't get me wrong, they were very useful, but they weren't the critical elements and factors in my development as a writer. I learned that the best way to become a skilled writer was to write and to get credible feedback. Those are main ingredients for improving as a writer. They were good for me then, they're good for me today, and they're good for you right now. If you want to get better, you got to write. If you want to get better, you better get to writing. And if you want to get really, really good at it, become a great writer, you got to find a good reader, a good coach, and a good script doctor. All right? I don't think the route that I took was a mistake because I don't believe in mistakes. I think I did what I thought I should do at the time. You buy a book and you start writing, which is what I think you should do as well, which, if you're listening to me, is what you've kind of done. You've bought this book, and I fully expect you to start writing as soon as you're done with it if you haven't already started. But I also believe that there's a way to help new writers accelerate their learning curve, and that is the real reason, seriously, that I wrote this book. Okay, and to feed my capitalistic streak, but that's another story. All right, first things first. If you're driving, listening to this, if you're not, if you're at home in your office or whatever, put your pen and highlighter away. When I read, I usually have a highlighter so I can capitalize on the things that I'm really interested in. The first time you read this book, I don't want you to study it. I want you to read it. Or if you're listening to me, the first time you listen to it, don't take notes. Breathe it. Eat it. Drink it. Enjoy it. I want you to read this book as you would a novel. You know, you'd curl up in bed with a drafty old blanket and a hot chocolate and you'd read, right? Same thing here. If you want to see something happen with your career, this is the place that you're right. You're in the right place, okay? Even if you see something that you want to remember later on, don't pick up a pen. Just read. Don't pick up a pen even if you're just listening to it. When we read with the pen in hand, it makes the journey less organic. So right now, the first time you're listening to this, just enjoy it, all right? There will be plenty of time to deal with the cerebral, the brain part of it later. In fact, I'm going to ask you to participate in some exercises in a little while. For now, though, let's just feed that inner scribe who wants so badly to put a good story on paper and ultimately on the screen. So what's a screenplay? A screenplay is a story that's told in moving pictures. So when you start writing your script, remember that if what you're writing won't show up on the screen, it don't go on the page. Yes, that's don't, you grammarians. It's not doesn't. I'm not going to say doesn't because I wanted this to be emphatic. If it won't show up on the screen, it don't go on the page. The reason this is important to emphasize is that a lot of people truly don't know what distinguishes a screenplay from other forms of writing. Or a better way of putting this is that many folks don't realize if their idea would be better suited as a movie or as an essay or as a novel or even just as a newspaper article. All right, that's important to know. If you want to know if your story is best suited for the screen, put it through this simple test. First, is your script full of long speeches or blocks of dialogue? Perhaps the story you want to tell would best be told as a stage play, if that's the case. Theater typically has minimal physical sets or locations and focuses more on what the actors are saying, not necessarily what they are doing or what's going on around them. The second part of the test, are you the kind of writer who enjoys telling the reader every single morsel of detail about every single thing in the story? You like telling the reader what shade of pink your character's wearing and how she got that deep gash above her left eye? Then perhaps you'd enjoy writing a novel or even a short story. All right? The third part of the test, is there enough meat to keep the audience engaged for at least an hour and a half? If not, maybe you should write a series of short stories instead of a script. All right? Or maybe you should write a book of essays. Now, I'm in no way trying to dissuade you from becoming a screenwriter. What I am attempting to convey is one of the essential elements to good script writing, stinginess. Great screenwriters learn to tell stories in as few words as possible, and I'll get more into the show don't tell diatribe later in the book. But for now, just know that if you want to be a good screenwriter, the first thing you'll need to learn is how to be stingy with your words and description. Sometimes writers slip into that novelese. You've probably heard that before when they're writing scripts. Don't know what novelese is? Here's an example of two script slugs. The first example utilizes the stingy principles, and the second scene has fallen into that novelese trap. Okay, here's a slug. Interior, house, day. Fran sits at her desk, pecking away at her computer keyboard, her eyes focused on the screen. Okay, that's short, that's snappy, that's to the point. Example 2, very novelese. Interior, house, day. Even though Fran has had a long day, she's still sitting at her computer, toiling away on the same paper she was working on last week. Her eyes, tired from reading for hours, remain locked on her computer screen. Oh, my goodness. If you enjoyed that last slug line, write a novel, not a script. Screenplays are pithy. Novels are verbose. Screenplays show. Novels tell. Scripts are succinct. Novels weave tales. Scripts, the good ones, get to the point, but most importantly, they don't waste white space. The scripts that readers enjoy the most have tons of white space throughout. At the end of the book, I'll give you an example, and if you bought the book, the physical book, then you'll see what I'm talking about. But I've included a couple of pages where you can see what a script should look like, but let's say you're visualizing, you're driving right now, you're wondering, if you were to put your hand in the center of a sheet of paper, the space around it, vertically, is the amount of white space you will want to see on a page, all right? But we'll talk about that later. White space is exactly what it sounds like. It's white space. There should be plenty of it. There should be plenty in the margins and plenty between the lines. More on format later, but for now, let's get the most important thing on paper. You've written a screenplay, or whether you've written one or not, let's talk about the most important element of your screenplay, the story. But even before we go there, I want you to think about the hook of your script. It ain't the book, it's the hook. I've said it a million times. It ain't the book, it's the hook. A hook is basically the concept of your movie. The more unique your hook, the better. The fresher your hook, the more interested the buyers. The hook of the film, Tootsie, let's say, is that a man dresses up as a woman and lands a role on a network soap opera. Now, there have been films that involved men dressing as women. Some Like It Hot is a good example. So what made Tootsie work? Well, the setting in which the man woman would eventually exist on a network television show. What made Castaway's hook interesting? Solitude, the Tom Hanks movie. What made that movie interesting? It was the solitude. It's not about a group of people stranded on an island, as in Gilligan's Island, but this movie forced us to think about our own survival if we were the only person on a particular part of the earth. That was the hook of Castaway. What is story? Robert McKee, internationally known author and storyologist, wrote a fairly dense book called Story. You may have read it or seen it. It answers this question in about 400 pages. It's a nice book, but I don't think you'd enjoy my book very much if I spent the next 200 pages trying to convey why story is so important to a script, would you? Story is to